Regional Business Council. And for those of you who are not familiar with the BRBC, we are an aggregate of 3 chambers of commerce, the Bridgeport, Trumbull, and Stratford Chambers of Commerce. And then in aggregate, we make up the Business Council, which focuses mainly on regional type activities and discussions like we're having today, both from an economic, through an economic development lens, as well as through a public policy lens. And now, of course, with this series that we've kicked off today, earlier this year, the workforce development conversations. And that's going to be a recurring theme. I think, that's been escalated due to the pandemic, but it's been a conversation, I think, that's been in the making for quite some time. So I'm happy to see people are using the chat. Thank you very much. And I just want to acknowledge as well, Fairfield County Community Foundation. Janine Freeman's here, and you'll hear from her in a bit. But they've are co-hosting this event with us, and we thank them for that. They're a trusted nonprofit partner and thought leader in Fairfield County. They're bringing together the community organizers, business experts, philanthropists, ultimately to close the opportunity gap in Fairfield County with a focus on eliminating disparities in education, employment, housing, and health, with the goal of creating a vital and inclusive community where everyone, every individual has the opportunity to thrive. So we're grateful for their opportunity to co-host this with us and help us guide these conversations. And then before I introduce our sponsor, basically, the supporter of this workforce development series, if those of you who are on the line, I just want to remind you, if you can just mute your lines, this way we can hear both from our keynote speaker, Shannon Marymon from Ready Connecticut, and shortly from Carol Heller, Southern Connecticut Market Executive for Bank of America. Bank of America has been, a tremendous partner of ours at the BRBC, I know, in the community here in Fairfield County and throughout Connecticut. And they've been really one of the leaders as it relates to their commitment to workforce development initiatives and supporting the hiring needs of the community. So with that, I'd love to introduce Carol to get us started here this morning. Thank you, Carol, for joining us.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dan. On behalf of my colleagues at Bank of America, it's an honor to partner with BRBC and Fairfield County's Community Foundation in hosting this new exciting series of conversations across our community, focused on regional collaboration, designing and supporting training pathways and connections, and most importantly, job opportunities and sustainable career pathways with local employers in our regions. So at Bank of America, we see tremendous opportunity, and we're deeply committed to supporting this work along the entire spectrum. A month ago, we announced an expanded $1.25 billion commitment to advance racial equality and economic opportunity for people in communities of color, with a particularly intense focus on job training and reskilling. So we're really excited to be part of this initiative. We're energized by what we think we can accomplish together and look forward to continuing to partner in addressing social and economic challenges facing our region. It's an honor for me this morning to introduce Shannon Marymon. Shannon joined ReadyCT in 2018, leading the organization to become a vital conduit for collaborative innovation among civic and business communities, and shaping policies and practices that equitably serve all children across Connecticut. Shannon has worked in pre-K through 12 and higher education for just under 2 decades. As a native of Connecticut, she's committed to narrowing the state's achievement gap and raising academic outcomes for all students through policy, advocacy, public awareness, and capacity building. Before stepping into her role at ReadyCT, Shannon was a director of talent and operations for CT Rise Network, responsible for establishing, advancing, and monitoring organizational goals related to student on-track achievement and college and career readiness. Prior to Rise, Shannon was district director for the Bureau of Education Effectiveness for the state of Connecticut Department of Education. During her 5-year tenure, Shannon provided leadership and support to districts and schools to expand talent management systems and strategic planning efforts. Her team was responsible for recruitment and retention of educators, program approval for education preparation programs, and implementation of the state's teacher induction program, and educator evaluation and professional learning systems, as well as various leadership development initiatives. Wow, that's a mouthful. You've accomplished a lot, Shannon. Shannon was partner and director at site launch for the new teacher project and spent 7 years working in higher education at Stanford University and Yale Schools of Art and Architecture. Shannon holds an MBA with a focus on nonprofit and public sector management from Yale University, an MA in art history from Stanford University, and a BA in art history and Spanish literature from Dartmouth College. She resides in West Hartford, Connecticut, with her husband and 2 children. Join me in recognizing and introducing and welcoming Shannon this morning. Shannon?
Good morning, everybody. So it is such a pleasure to be here, and I was just really thrilled when I received the invitation from the BRPC to come and speak to this audience, and I'm really excited to see in the chat the variety of kind of backgrounds and organizations that are represented. I think this will lead to a really great conversation. And I think one of the things I just want to stress before I get into the formal presentation, which I have a PowerPoint that I'll be sharing, is just how personal this work is for me. You know, I grew up in Connecticut. I'm actually originally from Spain, and am the daughter of 2 parents who did not really know where they needed to go in life or what their plans were. My father got to 8th grade and then stopped out of school. And ended up coming to the United States, learning English and going into the trades, and is now an HVAC contractor in East Hartford and doing quite well for himself, especially right now as we lead into the summer months. And then my mother kind of stopped in and out of education and ultimately ran a home daycare. So I grew up surrounded by children and little people who invaded my bedroom and my toys. But I think it's interesting to look back and think about, for all of us, you know, what did we think we were going to be when we grew up? You know, if you asked your 3rd grade self, what did you think you were going to want to aspire to? There's pretty much a pretty fixed set of jobs that come to mind. I was reading an article by the OECD recently that said that the number of jobs that come to the mind of young children, especially under age 10, has actually decreased over the decades. So there's a more limited universe of jobs that they even are like aware of or think of when they think about what's possible. And so I think the work we're doing is trying to ensure that students have the exposure and the access and then the opportunity to actually apply their interests and test it out, especially in these earlier years, so that they can be really set up for success when they get past their K-12 experience. So just wanted to start with that and have everybody think a little bit, you know, do think back to your younger version of yourself and what you were thinking about your trajectory, and what advice would you give yourself then now knowing what you know. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and jump into a quick presentation, but I do really want to get into some conversation as well. So just as some background, everybody see my screen? Yep, great. So Carol introduced the organization ReadyCT. We're actually the result of 2 nonprofits that merged together a couple of years ago. One was very much focused on policy work in the K-12 space, with an emphasis on narrowing the achievement and opportunity gaps in our state. For many of you, you may be aware that Connecticut has one of the worst achievement gaps in the country, and that's not something that people often think of when they think about the state of Connecticut. You know, we're usually applauded for our public education system, but it sort of masks the aggregate results, mask the reality of the disaggregated results when we're looking at students, especially in our highest need districts, which in Connecticut are known as the Alliance districts, and they make up at least 1/3 of the student population, and that is actually growing. And so we've always been very attentive to the fact that we need to address these gaps in order to build a solid foundation for the students and then ultimately for the economic vitality of our state. The other organization that merged into ReadyCT was more focused on direct support to schools and districts, and specifically career connected learning. So we've evolved our mission, and it's very much focused on both aspects of that work. We want to make sure we're setting that solid fundamental foundation around academic excellence, but then we want to much more explicitly provide career connected learning opportunities for students that are meaningful, that give them true exposure and access to the world of work. We do a lot of work around best practices as well as policies.
Yeah.
One thing I'll just note about policy is that we've never left that part of our history. You know, it's become a smaller portion of our portfolio, but I will say that policy is very important, always in the sense that it enables the practice. So when we know that there's good things happening on the ground, that we're seeing those results, how can policy enable more of that to happen across the state? And how do we remove policy barriers if that is indeed the case, that something might be standing in the way from being able to do more of the good things on the ground? And then in turn, we see that our practice, the work we're doing on the ground, is always informing the policy decisions and advocacy that we do. And we have a significant degree of credibility when we go and speak to legislators and other lawmakers about opportunities, when we can say, hey, we've been doing this on the ground, we see how it's playing out, and these are the things we need to be thinking about, and these are the unintended consequences of not doing certain things thoughtfully when it comes to policy. But today I'm going to really focus on our career pathway work, and I'll say that it sort of is made up of three components. The first being traditional career pathways, which I'll speak to in a bit more detail. And the career pathways means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. We follow a particular framework that I'll go into in more detail, but the idea is that it's providing a very intentional set of experiences and guaranteed opportunities for students so that they can know more about a particular career theme and industry area and build their interests or skills in accordingly, or make the discovery that it is not the best fit for them and they can, pivot and go in a new direction. The second body of work that we focus on a lot is computer science education. And the reason we carve that out as its own specific content area is that, as many of you know, computer science is sort of driving or the undergirding of so much of what we do in all industry areas now. Automation, Industry 4.0, all of that is really driving the need to have a better understanding of computational thinking, how computers operate, what is this very powerful device we carry around in our pockets all day long, and how do we use it for good? And so I think we want to ensure that computer science education gets a particular set of attention when it comes to K-12, because we are a state that is behind the ball a bit in terms of making sure that all students in Connecticut have access to computer science education. And not only is it embedded in the school experience, but that there's also a real effort to increase participation. So if you build it, will they come? Well, we got to make sure that they know about it, that they're encouraged to consider that coursework, especially when we're thinking about underrepresented students, students of color, and girls when it comes to computer science. And then the third area that we focus on is the post-secondary transition. So we're always thinking about how we launch a student from high school into what comes next. And we do not have a preconceived notion of what success looks like when it comes to that. We are very much interested in following the interests and the direction of the individual to determine whether they will go on to a traditional 2 or 4-year college experience, possibly into a sector-based training program or a credential, into the military, direct into a job. So we really don't want to have any judgment that's placed. And that's obviously, I hope we'll get into that a little bit more, a need to kind of shift the narrative around what success looks like and what availability of varied pathways exist for students, and because it's not a one-size-fits-all. So this slide, I'll apologize, the clipping came out a little blurrier than I had hoped, but you can see the big numbers, which is something that we reference quite a bit. I've been involved with the Governor's Workforce Council, which was stood up just over a year and a half ago. And a big statistic that they reference is sort of this perception disconnect, where the employers are saying one thing and the educators are saying something else. And I think a lot of the work we do is about translation and communication. And so realizing that, you know, and this is obviously at the college level, but we always kind of begin with the end in mind when we're thinking about the results and the outcomes from the college experience. We want to back into K-12 and consider what preparation students were provided there in order to then set themselves up for success in college. But 96% of college academic officers saying that they're confident in their institution's ability to prepare students for the workforce. And the corollary of that is that the employers are saying only 11% of them believe that that is true. On the right side, that's more about specific skills and dispositions on the part of students. This is sort of a perfect example of a bit of overconfidence. You know, we as a country are always kind of suffer a bit from overconfidence, but also just I think we're possibly misleading students sometimes into thinking that we've given them all the adequate opportunities to work on communications, team building, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, compassion even. And then so the green line is showing the percentage of students who believe that they are prepared for those skills. And then the darker line is the reaction of employers. So clearly, again, a disconnect. So this is just sort of representative of the need. There's lots of other ways to demonstrate that. And I'm sure everybody, especially those on the call coming from industry, probably have their own stories to tell about, you know, finding workforce. And I will say in the next slide, this is something I just wanted to stress, is that we are an affiliate of the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, CBIA, and the number one thing that they hear from their membership is one of the number one concerns of their membership is the need to invest in workforce. And what keeps them up at night is wondering where their workforce is going to come from next. And we know that, again, Connecticut is lauded for being a very highly educated population, but we are definitely missing the boat when it comes to lifting up the potential of all of our students and individuals so that we can have truly a vibrant workforce across all parts of the state. I do want to note on this slide that in addition to CBIA, we are forming more and more partnerships with other local chambers of commerce like the BPRC and BRBC, sorry, and that we also were working with the New Haven Chamber of Commerce, Waterbury Chamber of Commerce, and just before COVID had hit, we did something called the Cup of Joe Roadshow, which some of you may have attended. I know I met Dan at one of them, and the idea was that we were going to go to different parts of the state and show in real life, when we remember what that used to feel like, what a partnership looked like between K-12 education, specifically K-12, and business. So what would an example or an illustrative partnership look like? And we were able to do 3 of those in Fairfield, Stamford, and New London right before COVID hit. And then we had 4 more scheduled, and unfortunately those were postponed, but we hope to get back to that once we come out the other side of all this. And I think that that's an example of where we're just looking, you know, kind of open to lots of different partnerships and think that there's a lot of great things that are happening out there. It's just kind of finding out about it. So, you know, one of the things we just want to present is sort of the problem or challenge and the opportunity. And the idea is that really we've got a huge need in terms of workforce. You know, pre-COVID for sure, even post-COVID, we're seeing that especially in our high growth, high demand industry areas, there are a significant number of vacancies, and yet we don't have graduates from our K-12 system or our higher education system who are prepared for those opportunities. And we know that especially in the STEM fields, which is really where a lot of that growth exists, students are forming those decisions about whether they think they are STEM material or STEM is something they are interested in by the time they're in 8th grade. So if you're not reaching students early and often, you're going to miss a really key opportunity to get them excited and energized about something that they just maybe haven't had the exposure to up to that point. Definitely by the time you get to middle school and high school, we want to ensure that there's significant access, but it has to be brought to life. It has to be meaningful. It has to be applied learning. It has to be inspiring and exciting. And I think that's the goal of what we're trying to do within the K-12 space. The other thing I'll note is that specifically around computer science education, this is an area where we have very specific data showing that there's this gap where there's about 6,000, and that's on a conservative end, 6,000 available positions in computer science fields at any given time in the state of Connecticut. And we only have about 550 graduates in a bachelor's degree program each year in computer science. And there's a lot of other ways to get to computer science and tech positions that don't require necessarily a bachelor's degree, but we know that pipeline is not very, there's not a lot of awareness about it, and it's not provided as a really clear path for students. And so we want to make sure we're building that out. A lot of companies are starting to recognize the need to invest in K-12 education. I mean, this is not new. This has been going on for decades, but I think there's more of a coordinated effort happening. It feels like, especially with the work of the Governor's Workforce Council, that there's better alignment between the world, thinking about how our educational systems can connect to the workforce and to business and industry in ways that are meaningful for both parties, very much in the interest of students, making sure these are beneficial opportunities that set the students up for success, but likewise also something that is a benefit to the employer in the short term as well as very much in the long term. This particular slide shows a list of companies that are part of the career pathway framework, which I mentioned earlier. We work with specifically a program called NAF, the National Academy Foundation. They are a national nonprofit that has created a structure for grades 9 through 12. It's a experience that just kind of a consistent set of experiences that students would get around a career theme. And it's been around for 40 years. It was actually developed by Sandy Weil from Citigroup. And I honestly, before moving into this role, had not known very much about it. And coming into it, found out that there's actually, at this point, 11 NAF pathways or academies, they're sometimes called, in Connecticut. 10 of them are in the greater Hartford area, so I'll be speaking to those specifically, but there's also one down in Stamford. And there's a thought that, is this a model that there could be some traction and interest in bringing it to more districts throughout the state? There's also obviously other models like P-Tech, which we're very excited about and think is an amazing model. It's a 6-year model, so a little bit more involved and a little bit more resource intensive, but there's other frameworks out there. I am just going to be speaking a bit more specifically about the NAF model. And then these are the companies at the national level who are very much involved and committed to that career pathway program. And the idea of this exposure and access, which is something that we're really trying to prioritize in the K-12 space, how it looks in action is specifically these career themed pathways. And like I said, this model is very heavily represented in the Hartford area. The longest running NAF pathway, there's kind of a tie between the Hartford Public High School Engineering Green Technology and the Pathways Academy for Technology and Design IT pathway. The IT pathway, as a magnet school, Pathways Academy has been around for longer, but they both sort of started in the early aughts as programs supported by local industry. So the Engineering Green Technology was started up with support from United Technologies, now Raytheon, and the IT pathway was started by Travelers. Travelers then expanded to an insurance and financial services pathway. And most recently, very, very recent development as of yesterday, we've signed an agreement with Hartford Healthcare to support an allied health pathway also at Hartford Public High School. So these pathways are based on that NAF model, and the 3 elements of NAF are really simple. I always describe it as not rocket science. These are things that you could do and you could not call it NAF. I think the benefit of NAF is that it gives you the discipline and the structure to stick with it and have fidelity of implementing that model. There's also a whole back end of resources and data support that is provided when you're part of a NAF academy. But a lot of these things could be done kind of in phases. So the number one piece of the equation is a industry-informed curriculum. So when you're thinking about a career-themed pathway, what is the content that the students have access to? And so we work with industry partners to review the curriculum and the sequence of courses a student would take or have available to him or her in that theme, and have industry experts review it and give input and consider things like an industry recognized credential that could be built into the curricular experience so that a student graduates with something of value in addition to their high school diploma. The second key component is an industry advisory board. The industry advisory board, again, is made up of individuals who represent that field broadly. You know, we kind of want a really wide range of experiences. So again, students can learn about careers they maybe never have heard of. We also have partners from higher education, as well as community-based organizations, and then obviously members of the school district itself who sit on that board. They meet usually monthly, and they very much adopt the pathway and the school as a whole and kind of feel a true commitment and allegiance to that program, and are available to not only look at the curriculum, but also provide lots of experiences for students and put forward also resources when necessary. The third key component of NAF is work-based learning. And there's this idea of a work-based learning continuum where students start out, you know, we really start with middle school with the exposure piece, build on that in 9th grade. By 10th grade, they're getting more integrated kind of applied learning in the classroom. And by junior year or senior year, they're experiencing an on-site internship. And the requirement for NAF is actually 120-hour paid internship experience. So a student who graduates NAF track certified will have had the coursework as well as the internship experience. So just a really exciting model that we've had a lot of experience with. Happy to talk about it in more detail. But again, I think that there's learnings from this model that could be applied even in kind of smaller ways or in more informal ways to at least, you know, start somewhere and kind of build from there. The last kind of point I want to land on is around this idea of the systems level work that also goes hand in hand with what we do on the ground. And this is just to stress the fact that it's all about cross-sector collaboration. None of this is done alone. It's done in partnership with the employer community, but it's also done very much in partnership with state agencies, with the school districts themselves, and every school district has its own kind of structure and culture, and we kind of learn about the way that the school system is working and how to kind of connect and be effective in navigating that. We also work with the nonprofit community at large. We have lots of partners working with junior achievement. We work with makerspace locations. We work with a lot of higher ed institutions, Goodwin University as Nuntuck, Capital Community College, University of Hartford, Trinity College. We kind of just are equal opportunity partnership, I guess is the way to summarize it. And so I just want to speak a little bit about how we then bring this work up to the state level, since our career pathway work is so site specific. Again, transferable, could be brought to other sites, but we're always looking up at the systems level. These are 3 examples of that work. The first is the Manufacturing Skills for Connecticut project, which is a U.S. Department of Commerce funded grant that went to ConStep, our state's manufacturing extension partnership. And we are a subaward on that grant. And so what it is a 2-year research study of all the K-12 programs in the state of Connecticut that best prepare students for careers in advanced manufacturing. What's exciting is to find out how many of those programs exist in Connecticut. We sent a survey out to over 125 programs that had some example of programming that prepares students for advanced manufacturing. 52 responded to a very involved survey that took almost 30 to 45 minutes to complete. So a great response rate. And we are now in a stage where we're actually doing a deep dive evaluation of 13 of those programs to better understand kind of what are the elements of a high quality career pathway experience that we want to lift out and showcase. The last stage of this project will be to build an online repository with resources for the broader community around how to either build on your existing program or create a new one from scratch with resources to help you along the way. The second area of focus is around computer science. Like I mentioned, we are supporting the CS for CT Steering Committee, which is a statewide initiative to support computer science education and specifically operationalize the state computer science education plan, which, yes, there is a plan. It was adopted by the State Board of Education last June and also endorsed by the Governor's Workforce Council. So we've brought together representation from business, K-12, higher ed, and others to start to move the needle on what we need to do now, very much grounded in an action plan of what we need to do next for computer science. And the business community representation on that committee has been phenomenal. The last area I just want to touch on is this idea of educator externships, which is getting educators kind of brought into the process and excited about the world of work and exposure to their local and regional business partners. Oftentimes we make assumptions about what knowledge and experiences educators have had, and we want to make sure we're closing the gap on those assumptions and getting them the opportunities to be connected to local employers and go out into the work site and bring that learning back with them into the classroom. So we currently have a pilot of 30 educators going out this year to work sites all across the state, 10 different districts represented. And next year we're going to be partnering again. It's a partnership with the Connecticut Science Center and the State Department of Education. We're going to expand that up to 12 teams of 3, so 36 participants in total, and we hope to keep building from there. So I'll just end on this slide, which is sort of what can business do more immediately. And this comes from our Cup of Joe roadshow that we did pre-COVID, where we had a physical handout at that time where we kind of said, well, we want to leave you with something, so what? Like, we did this great presentation, we talked about partnership opportunities, how do we get started? So this was just some ideas for how business partners, if they want to get involved right away, can start doing that tomorrow. And there's a lot of opportunity right now with being involved with industry advisory boards. The ones that we're supporting up in the Hartford area are part of that NAF model, but there's also industry advisory boards required as part of the new Career and Technical Education Perkins grant. So a lot of schools are standing up those advisory boards and looking for membership and representation from business. Offer to be a guest speaker in a school, or to provide a job shadow, or to think about a field trip opportunity. And then internships are obviously a bit more of an investment, but they are very well worth it. I can't tell you how many times employers tell us that they sort of underestimated how awesome the high school interns would be. And they just knock it out of the park. And then I think there's this, once you have 1 or 2 interns, then you realize, oh, okay, this is actually a real benefit and not as hard as I thought it was going to be. And then there's an interest in doing more and more of that. And then think about an educator externship program opportunity, or tap into one that already exists. We'll be looking for employers to be hosts for the externships for next year. So definitely would love to hear from anyone interested in that. So I'm just going to end with that slide in terms of, I think the critical takeaway, I hope, is just that it's really critical that students get that exposure and that access. We can't take for granted that they've had these experiences. I think we also, as individuals who perhaps had kind of a more traditional educational experience, kind of knew how to work through the steps along the way and be kind of in a set up for success. There's this assumption that we kind of just, it just worked out for us, therefore it should work out for everybody. And I think that that's really dangerous when we're thinking about young people. There's so many different learning styles, so many different ways to be successful, and different aptitudes and strengths and skills that we want to nurture and cultivate in students. And so in order to do that, we need to provide them with those opportunities to learn it, apply it, test it out, fail, try it again. And then also along the way, build that social capital, which again, I think a lot of us take for granted, that we just have that network that we can tap into when we're thinking about, career advice or a career connection. We want to make sure we're giving all students that access as well. So I will close with that and just say that I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the work we're doing and fully recognize that there is good work happening all across the state. And we're just interested in kind of connecting and complementing any of those efforts, and look forward to the conversation with the panel as the second part of this presentation. So thank you so much.
Excellent, Shannon. That was wonderful. A tremendous amount of valuable information there. And one of the things that stood out to me, and I think we have a few minutes here for some questions too. So if you folks have any questions, you can enter it into the chat or raise your hand for questions for Shannon, and then we'll move on to the panel discussion. But one of the things that struck me as a bit of excitement is the focus on the manufacturing sector and getting kids exposure to some of those skill sets. For those of you who may not be aware on this call, Shannon referenced the Governor's Workforce Council, and one of the initiatives going on there are these industry sector partnerships that we're forming throughout the state of Connecticut. Here in Bridgeport, the BRBC and many of our colleagues that are on this call and throughout the area are going to be focusing on standing up a sector partnership with our manufacturers. For those of you, you're probably already aware, we've got 170 plus manufacturers here in the greater Bridgeport area. So it's a significant number of businesses that employ a lot of people, I think north of 25,000 people. That's even excluding Sikorsky. So tremendous amount of opportunity. Obviously, our role here at the BRBC is to really try to continue to feed the pipeline and drive the economics around the talent pipeline and the local economy and their success. So I was happy to see that. So I do see a couple of questions coming in, Shannon, and one is related to my last comment. But are there programs for college students or recent grads who may not have studied STEM, but are now interested in learning about pursuing that field? Thinking like coding boot camps, accelerated training opportunities. And that question came in from Fairfield University, Deidre. So thanks, Deidre, for submitting that question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. There are lots of opportunities, but there's just not a real central location to go to find out about them. So we were just meeting yesterday as a team with our post-secondary transition program, which is called Student 5.0. We work with students who are graduating from high school in the current year. So right now working with class of 2021 high school graduates who are graduating without a plan. And so we're trying to identify the different paths that they might want to think about, whether it is to continue on to a 2 or 4 year college or to go direct into some of these new boot camps, credentialing programs, sector-based training programs. And we're pulling together sort of a list of all the resources by region. We're also coordinating with Kelly Valeries, who I know you heard from at the last conversation, her office, to think about what would this resource look like. And I think it does. The challenge right now is having the one-stop shop where you could find those opportunities, because they're out there. I mean, Holberton and New Haven is a great example of a short-term tech program that you can earn your certification and get immediate employment upon completion with tuition reimbursed. There's a really cool tuition structure that they do. So they're out there, but I think it's trying to make sense of it and curate it, which is something that we're working on now.
Excellent. The next question is coming from Andrea Collins. She had a question related to internships. So is there a resource guideline or requirements that businesses need to put together in offering an internship? And can you highlight what those immediate steps might be?
Yeah, there are, when you're working with K-12, there are requirements around through the Department of Labor and in coordination with the State Department of Education that have to be followed in order for safety and security considerations. Working papers are something that are required, which really is just a process through which the student receives the official offer letter from the employer, and then it has to be processed through the school system. So you got to navigate some of the paperwork and some of the compliance and considerations of any kind of liability or coverage that would be needed. And so that's something we could certainly, I mean, it gets more into the weeds, but we're certainly happy to help be a resource and point to different documents. There's some on the State Department of Education website that can be helpful. And then I know that the Lieutenant Governor's Council for Women and Girls is working on an internship resource guide. I think there's many versions again of that, but there's one that would be from the student perspective as well as one that would be from the employer perspective. So I'm happy to share some resources afterwards. Yeah.
Perfect. And I just have one last question for you, and then we'll introduce Janine here and the panelists. With this, the whole pandemic this past year, and the impact on just how education is happening, especially in K through 12. What are you foreseeing as perhaps some opportunities that we've learned over the last year, or maybe some other challenges that we need to continue to vet out? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that the last year I was saying prior to the call that for some people it's a little bit too soon to be thinking about how to leverage remote learning and hybrid learning, especially for where we go next with public education. It's almost like we went to the far extreme, and therefore everybody is very much exhausted by it and feeling like one more Zoom at the end of the day just can't take it. But when we kind of balance out again, I do think that there's a huge opportunity to be leveraging technology to bring in expertise from other places that wouldn't have normally been available to students. We just, for example, in one of our programs about a month ago, brought in Pfizer to talk to students up in Hartford through Zoom or Google Meets, and to talk about the manufacturing of the vaccine for a group of students interested in advanced manufacturing. And we just never would have thought of that before. We would have assumed, oh, we're just not going to get the student down to Groton, and the Pfizer folks aren't going to come up to Hartford. But there's no reason that those limitations should exist anymore. The same goes for in the classroom directly, when we're thinking about expertise that teachers could access to bring into the classroom and inspire and motivate students. And then I think there's a real shift in the conversation right now around, there's always this thinking that the learning is the constant, time should be the variable, but right now we have time as the constant and learning is the variable, and that's problematic because we have really mixed results when we think about what it looks like to be a high school graduate from a school in Connecticut. So as we think about what technology can do, we could move more towards a more individualized approach to following the student and personalizing the opportunities for him or her so that it's not so rigid and fixed in terms of you either fit this mold or you're a lost cause, which I think unfortunately the current system sort of structures it that way. So I think there's a lot of conversation around changing what it means, like the definition of a school day, moving away from Carnegie units. I mean, that starts to get into the whole world of education speak, but I think it's starting to push on those boundaries and unravel some of the entrenched paradigm that we've always assumed has to be the way we design and deliver education. We have an opportunity to kind of completely rethink that now.
Great. Well, thanks, Shannon, again for your comments here and showing the good work that you're all doing. And it always amazes me when we have these calls that all the wonderful organizations that are all working towards this effort, and that's why I love what we do. And working together with you folks and others to just kind of bring everyone together so we're all kind of swimming in the same direction. So in the interest of time, I am going to move away from the Q&A. If you do have questions, please continue to enter them in the chat. What we'll do is we'll follow up with you folks if something pops up halfway through or even later today. I'll put my contact information in there as well. You can forward any questions you have, and we'll certainly get the answers over to you. So with that, thanks again, Shannon. Look forward to seeing how everything evolves. And now I'd like to introduce Janine Freeman, who's going to start and moderate our panel discussion. She's the Director of Education and Youth Development with our co-host here, the Fairfield County Community Foundation. Thanks, Janine, for your leadership and your insights in helping us put this wonderful series together. So with that, Janine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to Carol, and thank you to the panelists that I am going to introduce. I am so excited to be with you all this morning. And as Dan said, I'm the Director of Education and Youth Development at Fairfield County's Community Foundation, and the mission of the foundation is to close the opportunity gap. So all of these issues that we are talking about today fall directly into my wheelhouse as I try to support organizations that are supporting our young people across the county and helping them to graduate from high school and being college prepared and or career ready, and all of the things in between. So programs that are providing opportunities for our young people to work during the summers through summer youth employment programs and get the career exposure that will ultimately help them on a path to choosing a career potentially. So very excited to be with you all. And thank you to all of the attendees, many of whom have close relationships with the foundation. So we're so glad that you're here. We're hoping that you will also participate in this discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce the panelists. We will start with Gwendolyn Brantley, who is the Innovation Specialist with the Greater Bridgeport STEM Ecosystem. We also have Allison Logan, who is the Executive Director of Bridgeport Prospers. Sandeep Tibwal, who is the Dean of Students with Bullard Havens Technical High School. And Bernadine Bendito, who is the President of Junior Achievement of Greater Fairfield County. So thank you to you all for being here. And with that, let me start off, I think maybe Allison with you, because the Bridgeport Prospers really works from cradle to career as a collective impact group. And so you are really trying to bring all of various partners together to have conversations about how we help to develop our young people. And with that said, what do you feel we need to do in order to reduce some of these silos that we experience as we try to do this work and make students as successful as they can be?
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, everybody, for being here today, and really happy to represent Bridgeport Prospers and the United Way of Coastal Fairfield County in this conversation. So, Janine, like you said, we're a collective impact, and what that means is cross-sector individuals coming together, cradle to career. So we're looking at everything from prenatal all the way through youth employment career, and so there's a lot of things along that continuum. And so one of the efforts that Cradle to Career undergoes is that cross-sector alignment and really unsiloing folks, because we know that there's not one industry, it's not education, it's not business, it's not social service that can actually really work on this issue and really close that achievement gap. So it really takes cross-sector individuals coming together and really thinking of innovative ways to approach that. And it's also looking at how to reduce those silos to affect systems change. Because if you're just doing one program here and one program there and the programs are not aligned, then you're still doing the same thing you've always done. And part of the issue that I've always raised in this work is that, Bridgeport, especially where we sit, is program rich and systems poor. So there's lots of programs, there's lots of things for kids to get involved in. They're not all aligned oftentimes. And oftentimes it's really difficult to navigate the programs because there's so many. And so part of the work that we've done through the STEM ecosystem, which Gwen will talk about, is really aligning the business sector with the school district sector, with the higher ed sector, but then also social services, because if you think about the needs that especially kids in Bridgeport are coming into this with, that you need to really think about things like mental health and housing and supports for the youth that are really coming through this initiative. And then a part of this, somebody said in one of the last questions is talking about a paradigm shift. So coming together to our common purpose and not really coming at it from your own organization, but toward a common purpose of innovation and really working cross-sector really does take a paradigm shift, because it's not about your own individual organization or program anymore. It's really about the bigger picture. And I think that's what Cradle to Careers, there are 4 in the state, Stamford, Norwalk, Bridgeport, and Waterbury. We have come together as a state, as Cradle to Careers, really looking at how to really change those systems and really work across sector to unsilo ourselves.
And that is so incredibly rich. And we will definitely get into, I think, some of the specifics of the program. But first, let me turn it over to Sandeep, because you sit at the intersection between education, career at the Career and Technical High School, and you're teaching critical skills, tangible skills, and you're also obviously reliant on your relationships with employers. So can you tell me a little bit about how you have worked to develop those partnerships, and how have you sort of made the opportunity worthwhile to the employers that you're working with?
Sure. Thank you for having me here. Bullet Haven is a gem here in Bridgeport, and we are one of the 17 technical high school run and owned by the state of Connecticut. We not only do academics, but we have 13 different trades that the kids can choose from. And we spend half and half time, not 1-2 classes. We spend 90 days in shop and 90 days in academic. And we have all the construction trade like masonry, plumbing, electrical. Also, we have machine shop, auto, culinary, criminal justice. We just added this shop 2 years ago. So we have a whole lot of 13 shops that the kids can choose from. And these are all 4-year program where the kids go and select their shop they want to be in from 9th grade and be in that shop for the next 4 years. And we have a program called Work-Based Learning Program, where we place our kids as young as 16 years and have to be a junior in different businesses. They have to be a paid program. We also do job sharing. So we have a partnership with local businesses, including Sikorsky. We have an internship program with them. But a lot of employers have feel skeptic to hire young kids. And we are looking for more partnership, more out there so that we can promote our kids to go in there, because a lot of businesses have some policy that they have to be 18. But our program is approved by the state of Connecticut to have kids who are 16 can work. Juniors are allowed to work twice a week, and seniors are allowed to work 3 times a week. And they don't even have to come to school. They go directly to work and work their 8-hour shift. Thank you.
And I think that that speaks to something that Shannon mentioned, during her presentation about sort of rethinking how we talk about education and the types of credits and support that young people get as they're going on their journey, in order to figure out what those next steps need to be. So I think that that's critically important. The other thing, Sandeep, that I wanted to tease out is, I know that you have had a lot of success with your employers. Why do you think that is?
One of the biggest factors that employer come to us all the time, because our kids are pre-trained and they save so much on the cost. They are working on the job day one. They don't have to train them. So all the cost saving they have, like Sikorsky, they come in, they have an internship program with us. Over the summer, the kids are hired, at least 3 to 5 kids every year goes to Sikorsky. They have 8-week program and they pay like $25 per hour. And these kids are making $8,000 over the summer program. And once they graduate, they start at $60,000 at Sikorsky, like unheard of that. So that's why we are so successful, because we train them based on industry standard. Every year we have meetings with our department heads and industry professional like twice. It's called CTAC meetings, one in fall and one in spring, to what's going on in the real world out there, what we can do to help you. And that helps our student to learn the most important technology and latest technology that's going on. And that's why the employer come every year to us to have our student in their job.
So critically important in terms of, you helping to guide the students, and also having them leave high school with, stackable credentials. They have, the skills that they need in order to be employed. So that's a really great start. Now, if we sort of backtrack a little bit, would love to talk with both Gwen and Bernadine about sort of the roles that you all play in helping to develop those skills. So for young people who may not know what they want to do, but clearly end up engaging with you all, how do you feel that service providers and workforce development practitioners that are working directly with young people are helping them to develop those soft skills and also some of the hard skills that employers might be looking for? So Gwen, maybe we'll start with you and then we'll go to Bernadine.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me today on the panel, and to Shannon. That was a great presentation. Again, I represent the United Way, work with Allison, and I lead the Greater Bridgeport STEM ecosystem. But I think the first thing that we can do in terms of service providers, and there are several of our partners on the call with the STEM ecosystem is that, before we even begin working with students, have a discussion around what are soft and hard skills and why they are important to develop, whether they're starting one of our programs or whether they're beginning a job. They need to know skills like problem solving, critical thinking, empathy, and collaboration. They need to know that these soft skills are needed for the current and future workforce, along with hard skills such as technical, presentation, and marketing skills. I believe the best way to teach these skills, and Shannon has mentioned it, I believe the best way they're learned or gained is through project-based learning, because project-based learning activities provide an extended period of time where students can investigate and respond to authentic, engaging, and complex questions, problem solve, as well as participate in challenges. So an example would be, that they're working on a project to solve in their community or school, and then having the opportunity to present their findings, to their peers or their mentors. And then more along the technical lines, which I do a lot, is have them participate in like a math or robotics challenge, where they must work together on a team, again, over a long period of time, where they get to learn together, develop, design, and compete against each other, their peers. So that's, some of the ways that I think. Lastly, I'd just like to say that, we have to serve as their mentors, which is, something that Shannon mentioned too, and lead as an example. As we're working with these students, we need to also display some of these soft and hard skills, so that they, lead as an example so they can see them in action.
Yeah, I was so struck by the point that Shannon made around the perception gap between, where educators think that they are and where employers think that the students are when they come to them. So Bernadine, how does your programming through junior achievement sort of work in those areas?
Sure. And thank you, Janine, and thank you, Dan, for giving me this opportunity to be part of the panel. And what I would say, in listening to everyone, what junior achievement really does is build the foundation. So with junior achievement, we give experiential learning where the kids learn by doing experience-based learning. What really comes to life is bringing in our employers, our corporate partners, to be role models in delivering the program and bringing it to life. So what they're able to do is make that connection from education to real world, to say, these are paths, this is what it looks like, connecting their interests, connecting what is the real world like. So that foundation is critical. And the third part is partnerships with the educators, with employers, and the community. So through that experiential learning, I think that is really where that basis begins, and that exposure. Not only does it give also the work partners to come into the schools pre-COVID when it was all in person, but to see, like we've talked about, it's two different cultures. There's a real dichotomy between what the workforce employers see in schools, but then when you enter that culture, you can start to get an understanding of what it's like. And then to hear the needs of employers, the best I can give you is an example, agreeing with Gwen completely, project-based learning. We work in partnerships. So one of the examples I have is Pullman and Conley and People's United came together, their women leadership group, and they really wanted to work with women and girls and let them know, how do they develop, give them opportunity, let them know more about what the workforce is about and how they can prepare themselves. And so they came together, partnered through junior achievement with Central High School, and put together a day where the girls come and they are speed networking. They learn how to network. They learn how to build resumes, how to speak up for themselves, as well as other relevant information. So those are kinds of opportunities, Janine, that we start at a very basic level that has real impact.
And that is so incredibly helpful. And I think that as we look at the larger system and think about all of the roles that each of us play in touching young people, in helping to advance them, I think the thing that stands out in my mind is how collaborative you all are, and how there is a lot of work that's already being done in partnership with a variety of different groups sort of across the various industries and sort of sectors. So I'm curious to hear from you all how you think that school curriculum can be better aligned with employer needs. And we've talked a lot about sort of project-based learning and how that plays a critical piece in sort of developing the whole student. So I'd love to know, what you all think should be done. What are the things that are working currently, but where are the potential opportunities for us to better align school curriculum with the work that needs to happen?
I'll jump in. Sorry. We've heard a lot today about middle school, high school, but I want to reiterate, and because we're cradle to career, I want to reiterate how important it is to start building these skills early in pre-K and in K. And so, Gwen and I have talked a lot about, really building up STEM opportunities in pre-K and K, and what does that mean and what does that look like? And I also think there's an opportunity through project-based learning very early in a child's education to really build those professional skills early, but call them out. And oftentimes it's not happening. And so, a lot of, workforce development is not a separate program. It should be really built into everyday learning. And so, for example, if they're working on a project with their teammates, really calling out those professional skills that builds, like teamwork, like empathy, like listening and giving feedback and all of that, and presentation skills. I mean, if the curriculum was built in a way that those professional skills were actually called out and recognized, and so then children start to really build those from very, very early. And so, I'm a huge proponent of the earlier the better. And so working with school districts to really look at, first of all, project-based learning, and then second of all, what are the professional skills that the kids are learning through that? And then, the technical skills as well as early as possible. So we're working through the STEM ecosystem, really trying to really build that early exposure and early experiences.
Yes, and I just like to add a little bit to what Allison said. We have several partners on this call. We are partnering with the Bridgeport School District, but we also want to partner. Someone asked a question about private, and we have charter schools. So our cradle to career, we are concerned about outcomes for all students in Bridgeport. Whether or not they're in a public school, private, or parochial schools. But we've been having some conversations, a lot of conversations with Bridgeport Public Schools, as well as Capital Prep. So through our ecosystem, we are affiliated with a global, we have partners all over the United States, the country. And so we're able to learn from them about the different programs that they have going on. So we have started implementing an array of tools and initiatives that can align with the school district. For an example, Shannon talked about computer science. That's one of our initiatives that we're working with through Sacred Heart to make sure that there's more computer science available for Bridgeport students, as well as providing training for our teachers. So we are doing that work.
I'm going to just what everybody else said. The students have to have some kind of industry certification when they graduate high school. Like we do it, we have OSHA 10, OSHA 20, A+ certification, Microsoft certification, SafeServe. So, and machine shop we have. So once they graduate, they have something tangible. And even if they don't want to go to college, that's fine. They have something to go back to, fall back and do something. A lot of schools, regular high school, have CTE classes 1 or 2, but we provide is like half the time they spent in shops and half time academic with all this certification. And once they get out, they can still go to college. And we have a wonderful example of our education secretary, Mr. Cardona. He was a product of our system. I met O'Brien. So he did made it all the way to the top, even though he was in a technical high school. So industry certification is very important for us, that every child should have one once they graduate high school.
And Janine, what I would add to that, pick up on what you said, Allison, earlier, in how it's important to get these concepts at an early age. Junior achievement programs start from kindergarten, they go through high school. And at that elementary, at every level, the kids are learning soft skills through the activity-based learning. So what I would say, we have partnerships with over 90 schools all throughout Fairfield County and the Valley. And so when I look at that, I say, okay, because what junior achievement does is align with the curriculum. And that is why we're welcomed into the schools to bring in volunteers, and now virtually, since we've now gone to remote learning. But what I would say, it would be great to have that junior achievement programs that teach these skills become part of the curriculum. And we have worked in some situations where now we can have teachers teach some of that. So that's an area that I think we can grow in, and that would be advantageous, so that we, again, as we all work collectively, I see this as a real exposure, as a real basic, build it up. And for us, elementary school is where we start. We start the sequential learning, the concepts. I mean, they learn in second grade what an entrepreneur is, where to start a business. These are things you don't forget, that you save money, and then you learn with that money, you can take care of yourself and you can give back to your community. So these are concepts that are really important. And then at middle and high school, we build more deeper impact, but that's to me where we can all connect collectively to take that to the next level, providing those internships, certifications, and working collectively to really make a change into the workforce.
And Bernadine, you hit on something that that I've been very intrigued by and interested in from sort of the work at the foundation in thinking about workforce development preparation, and in terms of sort of the notion of entrepreneurship. And again, something that Shannon mentioned during her presentation is sort of not assuming that there is a one-size-fits-all model, that there is a role to be played, for all of these industries. So whether you're going into a specific industry because you've attended Bullet Havens, or whether you've been exposed to how do you think about creating a business plan, or how do you think about your love of cooking and sort of an interest in wanting to start a restaurant because you've been a part of junior achievement. And sort of those skills that come out of that. I would love to talk about, what do you all see are the skills that high school students have to graduate with in order to prepare them for those next steps, whether it is entering the workforce and working for a company, or whether it's going on to post-secondary education. What are the absolute minimum skills that students need to have in order to be successful?
Sure. I mean, I would say, we've hit the soft skills are imperative. Those soft skills, we cannot underestimate how important they really are. The second thing that I think is financial literacy, some kind of acumen to understand money a little bit. And why? Because no matter what it is, where they go, what direction, as adults, we all have to make decisions: spending, saving, credit. Those are so key. And when we look at different education paths, it's so important to understand what is cost. So many, when we see where we are as a country and we learn, so many adults don't know these answers. I think it's a critical skill that no matter what we do, we should really embed this at an early age so that kids understand it. And then as adults, they can make better decisions. And my other, I'm not sure this is exactly a skill, but I think it's really important that they leave high school, really understanding how to prepare for a career, build their own success plan. And what that looks like is starting from understanding their strengths and interests at younger ages, middle school even, to match with careers, the education pathways, the investment costs. So I think that at the least, like in a Bullard Havens, we know it's technical. Cindy, you talked about that. They need the certifications. Maybe there's a certification that's needed along these other pathways, if you will, because it really is important that everyone graduate understanding at least some path, you can change careers, but at least an understanding of that.
I think I keep going back to the early, but I think it's critical to build opportunities early enough that kids can explore a lot of different avenues. And I think, sometimes they get stuck in a lane and then, feel like they can't get out of it, right? And so by the time they're in middle school, they have to make a decision, they have to, and by middle school, they really should be exploring a lot of lanes and just seeing what it is. Another thing I think is critical is to really have kids have an understanding of the path if they choose a lane, the path and what they have to do. What's the next step? I think sometimes it seems so overwhelming when they think a 4-year degree and then, all of this, what comes. I think if it was laid out, and I know there's specific programs that do that lay out just your next step, because sometimes, and then your next step, and then your next step. And by the time you know it, that the youth is, fully prepared for what they're doing in their career. And I think sometimes, just by nature, we give it all at once and say, this is what you need to do to get to this certain career. And I think that's overwhelming, especially for, young children. And so really looking at a step-by-step process and a gradual process to decision-making. And it doesn't have to be, what they choose in 8th grade. It doesn't have to be the end all be all. That it really should be a process of really choosing what's the best fit. And oftentimes, it's overwhelming. And so like Gwen said, having that one mentor person or having that person really helping and guiding, is crucial.
I echo what especially Bernadine said and Allison, so I won't repeat that, but speaking from a personal experience, I think math is critical. I think if students can master skills in math, that they can be successful or get through anything that they choose. My personal belief, most of you know that I am a strong advocate for STEM, but I'm not pounding into my students, you have to be an engineer, you have to be an engineer. I just believe, again, from personal experience, raising my own child, that if a student can master skills in science, technology, engineering, especially math, I think they can get through anything that they want. They can go into any profession that they want to go into.
I'm going to add to what Gwen just said, that all these skills, I'm a math teacher as well. For 25 years, I've been teaching math and math all day. Honestly, if you have math skill, science or engineering, you can go a long way. And your options are not limited. You have so many options to do science, engineering, or anything else you want to do in life.
Well, and I will say that as someone who still doesn't know what she wants to be when she grows up, I think it's important to recognize all of these skills and being flexible and understanding that, I think all of you touched upon the fact that even if you choose something right now, that doesn't have to be the set path that you embark upon as you move forward. That there are lots of different ways that, and different opportunities that can take you into so many other areas. And I think that that's why I've been so incredibly excited about this conversation and sort of hearing from all of you, because it certainly confirms all of the things that we're thinking about here at the foundation and how to better support your work and all of the different aspects that go into it and how we need to be pushing on some of these issues to make sure that we are truly increasing exposure opportunities, which then leads me into the next question. Given the fact that, Bridgeport is majority minority, and that many of the young people that you are working with come from underserved communities, what are you doing and how can we all work to create more equitable access to opportunities and to industry pipelines? What work needs to happen there?
Let me start with our school. We need more employers to come down to Bullet Haven and hire our kids. A lot of employers are skeptic when they hear, oh, Bridgeport, they don't want to come to us. So if we can promote our school and come down and get our kids the job, that will be very helpful to us. And we have always a waiting list for kids to get in our program. Kids are not an issue, is the employer that we're looking for to come down and see what we do. And they're welcome to visit our school anytime. I can make an arrangement for that, but they need to come and see what we do and help our get a job sharing opportunity, internship, or a job.
I will echo that again, what Sandeep said. I mentioned earlier about mentorship. You know, I think that, again, students need to imagine themselves. So, you know, if they can see more professionals, right? Because I run STEM programs. I can run STEM programs all day long, but if they cannot see someone who looks like them or from their community in these positions, you know, I think it can be a little challenging. So yes, so definitely more mentors and professionals that look like them.
You know, Gwen, I think to pick up on what you both said and thinking about how we take advantage and opportunity in the virtual world, one of the things we do is work with corporate partners who bring their employees as volunteer role models to the school. That's virtual now. And one of the things we, to just like I said, piggyback on what you said, we at Junior Achievement realize and are committed to that our volunteer base needs to better represent the communities we serve, like Bridgeport. So the real opportunity here in a virtual world is to work with these companies that have employers all over in different states and to be able then to connect and see. So an example, again, Wells Fargo has come to us and said, you know, we recognize that we really need to be more diverse, but we also recognize that we don't have a pipeline that we think is diverse, talent pool that we need, etc. So one of the things we want to do is get more involved in developing that. So we work together to put together a program of what, you know, specific to career development and financial literacy with Central High School that they want to work with. And the beauty of it is we wouldn't have been able to do this in the past because it's virtual, we're engaging businesses from different states. So I think that is really critical in having those businesses see those kinds of opportunities. So if they can't come to Bullet Havens or they can't come to a school, they can virtually. And that's a way to connect because we cannot do it without that commitment and willingness of the business community to work with the schools and see. And like we said from the beginning, to get that understanding of the two different cultures and bringing it together.
Right. And, you know, just let me add this, that's virtual. So although COVID was a horrible thing, it has lent itself to people being more flexible with teaching online, because now, as Bernadine said, we have access to more a more diverse pool of mentors. And someone, I saw the chat flash up, someone mentioned funding. Yes, equitable funding is important. And I know that Janine is working on that with the foundation. I know that's an issue that they're looking into.
And I also think I just want to piggyback on that and say, you know, oftentimes We hear the term social determinants of health all the time, but social determinants of education. So we think about what are the barriers that are facing the kids who live in Bridgeport, and the barriers to even imagining what possibly could be. So making sure that we're partnering the business community with social service and making sure that we're breaking down those barriers for kids that often exist with no fault of their own, whether it's a housing situation, whether it's a family situation, whether it's a incarceration situation in the family, which is causing barriers to even think outside of where they actually are. And, the stress and trauma that occurs with adverse childhood experiences and everything that's happening, you making sure that social service is involved in this conversation too, I think is crucially important. And there's amazing organizations like the Workplace and places that actually provide the wraparound services that really break down the barriers so kids can imagine outside of where they are now. So, I think that's really crucially important too.
And I think as Bernadine, were you gonna chime in?
No, I wasn't.
Well, and I think, Allison, that is a perfect segue to, I think, what my final question is. What are you all excited about as you do this work and as you think about the future? What excites you and sort of continues to fuel that passion?
You said 11:30, right?
So I'll start. I'm excited about the way that we are all adding, coming together, first of all, and recognizing that if we all look at the strengths of each of our organizations, the work of that Shannon talked about, we really can put together some steps to make differences and connect the kids from school to the workforce. At JA, we're really excited that we have, and I know that one of my colleagues put it on the chat box, but we just started, it launched yesterday for 3 months, is taking an opportunity in this virtual space. We call it JA Inspire Virtual. It's everything we've talked about. It's providing students an experience and connection to high growth, high demand industries. It's recognizing, we heard the needs of the schools of giving kids experience, exposure, help them start to build a plan, and then from employers building a workforce. So I encourage all of you to please go on the platform. It's situated by industries, and then all of the companies are there being able to not only give kids what do jobs look like, but what is the education, what are the interests, what are the skills, what do you need? And so the pre-work, they'll be doing assessments about their own skills and talents, go on, be able to explore, hear from industry experts. And then finally, they will have a link into jobs and, what kind of jobs are available, what do they cost in different careers, what do they pay, what is the education? So we're really excited about taking this virtual world and creating this opportunity that, like I said, on a virtual platform really gives students that opportunity and employers the opportunity to connect with kids. So I encourage all of you to please go on and listen. Here, Mark Cuban was a JA alum and talk about how to start what he thinks is important. So these are the kinds of opportunities, to your point, Allison, that kids need to hear and go beyond the world they're in and say it's possible.
I'll go. I'm really excited about the change in conversation since COVID. I just feel like there's been a change in conversation and really putting at the forefront, really looking at educational justice and really looking at, opportunities and the funding aspect of this. I mean, there is, a funding, we're in a place we've never been before where there's large funding streams coming, from the state and federal governments, and really looking at and having things like the Government Workforce Council, who's really looking at really innovative ways to really infuse that into school districts and places across the state. I feel like we're at a junction right now where people are unsiloing themselves and coming together. And that's why, I am really excited about, Gwen's work with the STEM ecosystem and why it's part of our Cradle to Careers, because these conversations are really happening. And so really innovative things are really on the cusp and really happening now. And so really proud to be part of that work, and then proud of this conversation. And I think, you know, collaboration is the only way, and cross-sector and unsiloing ourselves. So we're really excited about that opportunity.
Yes, to piggyback off Allison, I'm excited about the work of the STEM ecosystem and what I've been in this STEM arena for the past 15 years. For the first time, I feel like I'm working with a group of individuals who are authentic, who are transparent, who really want to work together and collaborate for the betterment of children and youth. I have some great partners. We are looking for more. So if you're interested, I can definitely talk more to you about what we're doing, how we all got started, but just excited about the different initiatives that we've started doing and that were implemented. So just excited for, again, like authentic partnerships that's huge for me. Authenticity. Can't even talk, but yeah.
I'm very excited to be here at Woodard Haven and make a difference in life of our young adults here and show them a pathway to success. Like this is a possibility, and shows them there are many, many opportunities that they have if they go through these programs and what is out there and make a difference in their life.
So I thank you all for the amazing work that you are doing, for being our partners and doing this together. I so appreciate the conversation, and I'm going to turn it over to Dan, I think, to close us out.
Thanks, Janine. Thanks, panelists. Gosh, you know, incredible conversations. My mind's spinning here in terms of all the, I mentioned before, all the wonderful programs that we have, and how can the BRBC and our chambers, you know, continue to bridge that gap between all these wonderful programs and business, you know, and really just to foster, you know, these kind of conversations and help, you know, connect the opportunities that are out there for our young future leaders. So it's a great conversation. I appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate the time of the folks that participated, not just on the panel, but Shannon, of course, Fairfield County Community Foundation, and Janine, and all her work she had done with us to put this on. And of course, Carol Heller and the folks at Bank of America for their support in this particular conversation. And then finally, you know, the folks that are able to take the time out of their day for this very relevant conversation, we sincerely appreciate that. I know everyone's time is valuable these days, and perhaps getting a little bit of that Zoom fatigue, but hopefully we see some light at the end of the tunnel here where we can have some of these conversations in person in the near future. So that said, this was our second part of this workforce conversation. And we will be having a third part to this on June 9th. So for those of you who would like to continue the conversation, I know I saw in the chat, and we talked a little bit about it, this conversation related to the manufacturing sector, as we're going to try to drill down a little deeper into that sector. But June 9th is our annual meeting. We will have the third part of this workforce series discussion at that time. It'll be at 12 noon. And our keynote speaker will be Colin Cooper, who is Connecticut's Chief Manufacturing Officer. So we will look forward to that particular conversation and putting together a program for that. So keep an eye out on our website. Hopefully you're all part of our newsletter that you get weekly. And then finally, if there are questions, I took notes on the chat there where there were a couple of questions that popped up that we'll circle back around with you folks on. So don't worry about that. And then, of course, we will share this particular recording out through our newsletter, social media, YouTube, and all that other fun stuff. So thanks again, everyone, for your time today. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day and a great end of the week. So thanks again, everyone. Enjoy yourselves, and let's continue the dialogue. Be well. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.